1907 Appalachia, a place where the mountains hide more than just shadows. Deep in the mist lies Hollow Creek Orphanage, a place with a secret so chilling it was never meant to be discovered. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you don't want to miss the horrors lurking in history, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing this story reach people from every corner of the world. Now, brace yourself, because the truth about Hollow Creek is darker than you can imagine. There are places in these mountains where the wind sounds different. It moves through hollow trees, over forgotten graves, through the ribs of old barns. And sometimes, people say, it carries voices. In the valley below Hollow Ridge, one voice never stopped. A new orphanage opens on company land. A building of brick and good intentions, or so they said. The miners' widows were promised safety for their children, warm beds, full meals, a future. But every promise in Hollow Creek came with a silence behind it. The town ledger lists 57 children taken in that year. No records of adoption, no transfers, no graves, only a single page in the county archive written in fading ink. All souls accounted for. Facility closed. That page was signed by a man who disappeared 3 days later. Locals kept their distance. They spoke of the orphanage the way people speak of a fire long burned out, careful, quiet, afraid that the ashes might still be warm. The building stood until the winter of 1909. When smoke rose from Hollow Creek, no one went to help. Officially, it was called an electrical fire, but there was no electricity in that part of the ridge. When the embers cooled, they found no remains, no bones, no soot-covered shoes, just the outline of beds scorched into the floorboards, as if the weight of the children had burned itself into the wood. For nearly a century, the name Hollow Creek Orphanage vanished from state records. Maps erased the property. The mining company folded. Even the road leading to it was renamed. But the land remembers. And sometimes the earth gives back what people try to hide. In 1992, a construction crew digging for a new highway unearthed a foundation, brick walls, buried deep beneath layers of clay. Inside, they found something the reports couldn't explain. Child-sized remains, with markings carved inside the skulls. A pattern that matched no known tool or ritual. The county halted the excavation within hours. The site was sealed. What they didn't seal was the sound. Several workers claimed to hear music, faint, rhythmic humming, echoing from beneath the dirt. One described it as a lullaby with no end. Within a week, 3 members of that crew quit their jobs and left the county entirely. The official statement said no remains were identified, but someone kept the photos. And when those images surfaced decades later, a detail caught the attention of researchers. A single stone plaque, half buried, marked with the name Wren. Elias Wren, the man who funded the orphanage. His fortune came from coal and copper. His writings, what little survived, spoke of sound as energy, of finding the resonance of the soul, the same resonance that miners in the hollow once swore they heard echoing from beneath their boots. So what was Hollow Creek? A home for lost children? An experiment in compassion? Or something older? Something that used the language of mercy to hide its purpose? Tonight we open the records, we follow the documents, the photographs, the fragments of song that still surface in the static of old recordings, and we ask a question this valley has avoided for more than a century. What really happened inside Hollow Creek Orphanage? Pause. Faint wind, almost a whisper. If you listen closely, you might still hear them. The Appalachian Mountains have always carried more than their share of stories. Some are sung in old ballads, others whispered in places where the fog hangs low enough to listen. Hollow Creek lies in one of those forgotten folds, a valley never marked on tourist maps, a place where the forest seems older than the soil itself. Before the mines came, before the company towns, there were only a few families scattered along the ridges. They lived quiet lives, hunting, farming, burying their dead on their own land. That changed when the Wren Mining Company arrived. Elias Wren promised progress. He promised work, roads, and schools, but the promise cost the valley its silence. Men dug into the earth day and night, pulling coal from seams that ran black beneath the hills. With the work came danger, cave-ins, gas pockets. A single spark could take 50 lives before dawn. In 1906, an explosion tore through the number 4 shaft. 39 miners died in less than a minute. The next morning, the company clerk began taking down the names of the children left behind. There were 57. Some had no relatives left. Others were too young to remember the faces of the men who died underground. Within months, a proposal appeared in the county records, drafted by Wren himself, to build a charity orphanage for the children of lost miners. He called it a sanctuary of renewal. Construction began that fall. Local men were paid to clear land by the creek, to lay brick foundations. The ground was hard, unnaturally so. Workers wrote that their shovels struck stone where no stone should have been. One foreman noted that they uncovered a circle of black rock beneath the soil. When he asked to remove it, the company ordered it left untouched. A week later, that same foreman left Hollow Creek and never returned. By the spring of 1907, the orphanage was finished. 3 stories, red brick, white trim, a bell tower above the main hall. To the townspeople, it was a symbol of charity. To the children, it was a promise of survival. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. Meals were served, lessons were taught, prayers recited at dusk. But in the caretaker's journal, one of the few surviving documents from that time, the tone changes quickly. The children hum in their sleep, she wrote, all of them, the same melody, though none remember learning it. No one could explain where they'd heard it. The melody had no words, only a rising and falling tone, like the echo of a lullaby carried through stone. The journal continues. They say it comforts them. They say the lady by the creek taught them. No staff member had ever seen a woman near the water. Soon, animals began to vanish. Chickens, a mule, a stray dog that used to sleep near the kitchen door. The children said the lady took them too. One morning, a small girl named Sarah May did not appear for breakfast. Her shoes were found by the bed. Her window was open. Search parties scoured the woods for 3 days. They found nothing but a strip of ribbon caught on a branch by the creek. The local sheriff filed a single report and closed the case. In her journal, the caretaker wrote, "At night, I still hear her singing with the others." Within weeks, 2 more children vanished, both from the same dormitory, both after rainstorms when the creek ran high. Parents began visiting the orphanage in secret, begging to take their children home. The Wren Company refused. "The wards are property of the state," one official said. "They must remain until legal custody is reassigned." No reassignment ever took place. Those who lived nearby said the sound of singing carried farther every night. They spoke of lights flickering in the bell tower long after curfew and shadows passing the windows when every child was supposed to be asleep. Rumours spread that the orphanage had been built on cursed ground, though no one could agree on the source of the curse. Some said it was the old burial circle disturbed by the workers. Others said the land itself had grown tired of holding the weight of the dead. By winter, the caretaker stopped writing in her journal. Only one final entry remains, dated November 12, 1907. He says the children are special, that their voices will carry farther than mine. I pray he is wrong. There is no signature. For decades afterward, no official record mentions the Hollow Creek Orphanage. It simply disappears from state filings. No closure notice, no transfer documents, no property sale. The next mention appears 2 years later in a local newspaper. Fire consumed structure near Wren property. No survivors. The photo printed beside the article shows only smoke and rubble, but if you look closely just behind the collapsed tower, there's a shape in the haze, faint, almost human, standing by the creek. Some say it's just a trick of the camera. Others say the photograph captured what the fire failed to destroy. What happened in those missing months between the last journal entry and the fire remains unknown. The company files were sealed. Witnesses vanished or kept silent. All that remains are fragments, letters, faded photographs, local hymns altered by time, each carrying the same haunting rhythm. The hum of Hollow Creek. Even now in certain recordings from the early 1900s, you can hear it faintly under the static, a low, rhythmic tone, repeating like breath. Some researchers claim it's an artifact of the wax cylinders used for sound at the time. Others say it isn't part of the recording at all, that it's coming from the room where the recording was played. Brief silence. Before the orphanage burned, Elias Wren was seen only once more in public. A photograph taken at a mining conference shows him seated in the front row, thin, pale, staring directly at the camera. On his lapel, a small brass pin, the same design found carved into the foundation stones beneath Hollow Creek nearly a century later. Those who study the photo say something about his eyes looks off, as if they've been printed twice. 2 exposures layered slightly apart. That image, like so much else in this story, was quietly removed from archives in the 1950s, but copies remained. And when those copies were compared to portraits of Wren from before the orphanage was built, a detail emerged that no one could explain. His pupils were different sizes. When asked about it years later, one historian simply said, he looked like a man who'd seen something that stared back. This is the beginning of Hollow Creek's story, a town that tried to bury its past beneath soil, silence, and fear. But history, like sound, has a way of resonating through what remains, and in Hollow Creek, the resonance never stopped. Long pause, faint echo of children humming returns, barely audible. Next, the whispers that followed the fire, and the inspector who vanished trying to find their source. After the fire, Hollow Creek disappeared from the headlines. The county listed the site as condemned, and the surviving families were moved to other mining towns. For most, the story ended there. But a century is a long time to keep a secret buried. When the first researchers began tracing the origins of the orphanage, they discovered that the official record wasn't just incomplete, it had been rewritten. Multiple files from 1907 to 1909 contained the same handwriting, the same signature repeated under different names. That signature belonged to a man named Henry Dawes, a state inspector. According to payroll ledgers, he was assigned to visit Hollow Creek in October of 1908. His final expense report was filed 2 days before the fire. After that, nothing. No obituary, no grave, no family record. In a trunk belonging to his sister, discovered years later in a farmhouse attic, a single page survived, browned, water-stained, written in pencil. The children hum through the floorboards. Their eyes follow the sound. There is movement where there should be none. Something breathes behind the stone. The handwriting trails off at the edge of the page. Some claim that Dawes lost his mind in the weeks before the fire, that the isolation of the mountains and the grief in that place consumed him. Others believe he found what the caretaker had warned about and tried to stop it. The truth may never be known. What can be verified are the letters written by the children themselves. A collection of 17 notes preserved by a local historian, each addressed to families who never returned to claim them. Most are short, simple things written in uneven handwriting. We are safe here. The lady sings at night. Mr. Wren sees the song makes us stronger. One letter stands out. It is unsigned, written in darker ink, as if pressed into the paper with shaking hands. Please do not come for me. The creek is not water. It listens. We have to keep singing, or she wakes. No one knows who wrote it. The paper was found years later, sealed inside a hymn book, buried beneath the church floorboards. There is another detail, faint pencil marks along the edges. When magnified, they form a pattern. Circles intersecting lines, almost musical notation, almost a map. The same pattern appears carved into a piece of wood recovered from the site in 1992. Some experts identified it as an early form of resonance mapping, a way to visualize sound through vibration. The pattern responds when exposed to certain frequencies, as though the material itself remembers the tone. The children's humming, the rhythmic pulse, the lullaby without words. It wasn't random. It was being shaped. Elias Wren once wrote in a letter to a fellow industrialist, "The soul vibrates at the pitch of its suffering. To harness that vibration is to touch eternity." Many dismissed him as a fanatic, yet decades later, the same equations would appear in early sound resonance experiments conducted by physicists who had never heard of Hollow Creek. There is a theory that sound can leave impressions, that violent emotion, repeated prayer, or sustained trauma can imprint itself into physical space. If that is true, then the orphanage was more than a building. It was a chamber designed to hold a frequency, and the voices of 57 children were its instrument. Some say the children weren't victims, they were participants. In the weeks before the fire, residents in the nearby town of Briar Hollow began reporting strange behavior. Children walking in their sleep, murmuring words in a language no one recognized. A local pastor wrote in his diary that he heard them singing by the creek at dawn. Not just one or two, but dozens. A full chorus echoing through the trees. When he approached, the voices stopped. There was no one there. The next day, his congregation found the creek water red with clay and his Bible open on the bank. Every page had been torn from the book of Psalms. After that, families began moving away. Whole households abandoned in the middle of the night. By the end of 1909, only the orphanage and the Wren estate remained. A letter from a railway clerk that same year notes, Mr. Wren requested shipment of 12 wooden crates to Hollow Creek, each marked instrument components. No return address. None of those crates were ever recovered. When the fire consumed the building a few months later, the company claimed it destroyed years of philanthropic work. But behind the language of loss and charity, something doesn't add up. How does an electrical fire ignite in a building with no wiring? How does a blaze burn for days without a single survivor? And why, in every photograph of the ruins, does the ground around the orphanage appear untouched, as though the fire burned upward, not outward? Modern investigators studying the few surviving artifacts found traces of fused sand along the basement stones, the result of extreme focused heat, hotter than any wood fire could produce. Heat or vibration. The reports were quietly filed away, labelled unsubstantiated. But there is one final detail, hidden in the inspection notes, that survived. Henry Dawes' last recorded words before vanishing, "If I cannot stop it, the mountain will." She has listened long enough. No one knows what he meant by she, but from that day forward, Hollow Creek never ran clear again. Every spring, when the thaw begins, the water turns the colour of rust for 3 nights only, then fades back to normal. Locals call it the season of the Red Creek. They say if you stand by the water's edge during those nights, you can hear a faint chorus beneath the current, a hum rising and falling, carrying a rhythm that matches no song known to the living. Some have tried to record it. Their devices pick up nothing at first, only static. But when the playback begins, the hum is there, along with something else. A single word whispered low, return. Whether it's memory, illusion, or something that never truly left, no one can say. What is certain is this: every person who has heard that sound describes the same sensation, an ache behind the eyes, a pressure in the chest, a feeling that the air itself is moving in rhythm with their pulse, as if the valley is listening. And in that moment, Hollow Creek feels alive again. Long pause. Next, the hidden files from the investigation that followed, and the discovery of what the inspector sealed beneath the orphanage floor. When the state archives were reopened in 1979 for cataloguing, a clerk noticed something strange in the Hollow Creek file. The folder was thick with duplicates, forms rewritten in the same hand over and over, each one listing different numbers of children, different staff names, different closure dates. The more she looked, the clearer it became that someone had tried to erase Hollow Creek not by removing its record, but by overwriting it. At the back of the file, there was a smaller envelope. Inside were 2 items, a rusted key and a torn inspection note signed by Henry Dawes. It read, "Lower level sealed. No entry permitted. Do not break the bond. HD." The phrase, "the bond," appeared nowhere else in state documents. A marginal note written in red pencil adds another line. Seal complete. Resonance contained. For nearly 70 years, no one had any idea what it meant, but the phrase would reappear again in Wren's private correspondence. In 1908, Elias Wren wrote a letter to a doctor in Chicago. "Our work here nears completion. The bond between voice and vessel is almost perfect. Soon the barrier will break on its own." The doctor he addressed, Alaric Boone, was a physicist experimenting with acoustic resonance in steel structures, trying to prevent bridges from collapsing under vibration. Wren's language was eerily similar. Both men spoke of harmonic containment. But in Boone's surviving notes, there's a chilling distinction. Wren wasn't trying to prevent collapse. He was trying to cause it, not in metal, but in the human soul. He called it the hollow frequency. According to Boone's margin comments, the frequency could be generated by precise human voices trained to sustain tone for long periods. Children's voices were ideal due to their pitch and uniformity. Wren wrote that the sound could unfasten what binds life to flesh. When the inspector arrived, he must have witnessed something close to this experiment. Local rumour claims that Dawes ordered the basement sealed after hearing the sound. That phrase appears in multiple accounts, always the same wording, as though passed down verbatim. He heard the sound. One miner's widow described seeing him stagger out of the orphanage late one night, his lantern swinging, his face grey as chalk. He told her, "They're still singing, but not with their mouths." She thought he was drunk. The next morning, his horse was found tethered outside the building, reins cut clean through. Dawes was gone. A week later, the orphanage caught fire. Years after the incident, fragments of his inspection logbook surfaced in an estate sale. 3 pages survived, each water damaged and barely legible. The first page details his arrival. Structure sound, staff cooperative. The second, children appear malnourished, singing lessons mandatory each night. The third page, written in smeared ink, reads only, "It's beneath us, voices through stone, hollow in every sense," and below that the same symbol found on Wren's lapel pin, 2 concentric circles joined by a single downward line. Researchers call it the hollow seal. The earliest known example of that symbol predates Wren by centuries. It appears carved into stones near indigenous burial mounds across Appalachia, meaning unknown. Some anthropologists suggest it represents a river flowing between worlds. Others call it the mark of a doorway. Wren's notes, combined with the inspector's fragments, imply that he believed the frequency could open such a doorway. Not metaphorically, but physically. He described it as an echo that bends space upon itself. When questioned later about his theories, surviving colleagues of Wren dismissed him as an eccentric obsessed with sound. But none could explain how his estate continued to receive funding years after his recorded death in 1909. The checks came from an account labelled only Hollow Creek Educational Fund. That account remained active until 1921. The ledger stopped without notice. Decades later, when investigators traced the financial trail, they found withdrawals made from a remote post office in the same region. The signature on each withdrawal form matched Henry Dawes. The ink, when tested, was modern. Whether this was a forgery or something stranger, the documents remain part of the state's unsolved historical anomalies. In the 1940s, a survey team cataloguing old coal shafts in the area uncovered a sealed iron door deep in an unused tunnel. It bore the hollow seal. The team recorded a temperature drop near the site and faint reverberations as if the mountain itself was vibrating. They marked it unstable and left it undisturbed. The coordinates align precisely with the foundations of the old orphanage. From then on, the government records on Hollow Creek end abruptly. But in 1971, a journalist named Margaret Lyle began investigating disappearances in Appalachia linked to abandoned mines. Her notes mention Hollow Creek several times. Her last entry reads, "Heard a low tone under the floor, like a choir breathing in unison." She vanished a week later. Her tape recorder was found near her car, out of power. When restored, the tape revealed 9 seconds of humming before static overtook the recording. The pattern matches the same frequency etched into Wren's early diagrams. Whether by coincidence or design, the sound reappeared decades apart, in different media, under different circumstances. Always identical. Always near Hollow Creek. It is said that the inspector sealed the basement to contain whatever residents had begun there. But if the sound is still heard today, the seal may not have held. In 1992, when construction crews reopened the ground, the marks they uncovered, the fractures, the circles, the half-buried carvings, formed the same pattern as Wren's seal. It wasn't a doorway he sealed, it was a wound. And wounds, if left unattended, eventually open again. There are no witnesses to the fire, no photographs of it burning, only the aftermath, the blackened remains, the stone chimney still standing like a monument to something no one would name. The official cause was listed as structural failure leading to combustion. But the orphanage had no electric wiring, no gas lines, no stoves on the upper floors. There was nothing to ignite. Survivors from neighbouring towns described a distant light in the valley, not orange like fire, but white, almost colourless, like the glare of a welding torch against fog. For 3 nights the light pulsed, then vanished. When the first rescuers arrived, the building was already ash. No bodies were recovered, not even bone. The report says the heat was intense enough to fuse glass to stone, to melt nails into the floorboards, to turn the ground beneath the bell tower smooth and reflective, as though it had been poured with liquid metal. Yet the trees around it remained untouched. The grass still grew at the edge of the ruin. Whatever burned that night, it burned inward. Elias Wren was presumed dead. His estate was seized, his holdings divided among creditors. But no death certificate was issued. His body was never found. The fire ended the orphanage. But it did not end the sound. Residents in the next valley over, 15 miles away, reported hearing music for days afterward. Not the hum this time, but something sharper. One woman described it as the cry of wind through glass. Another said it was like singing inside a hollow pipe. The tone persisted through the spring. Then it stopped. The town of Briar Hollow fell silent. The mine closed within the year. The valley was left to the forest and the slow return of water through the creek. When state engineers surveyed the site decades later, they found evidence of subsidence. The ground had sunk by nearly 3 feet where the orphanage once stood. Underneath, a hollow cavity. No one explored it. The shaft was sealed after the first team reported dizziness and fainting. Instruments registered low-frequency vibration, constant, steady, like a pulse beneath the soil. For years afterward, locals spoke of the humming earth. They said if you placed your ear to the ground, you could hear the rhythm, slow, patient, never stopping. But not everyone who heard it remained well. A farmer who built his house near the creek in 1911 claimed that his animals refused to cross a particular stretch of land. He dug there, thinking to remove a buried log. What he uncovered was a layer of glassy stone, curved, smooth as the inside of a bell. That same night, he wrote a single line in his ledger. They were not burned. They were changed. He moved away before winter. His farm never sold. Over the decades that followed, the land became a quiet place for drifters, researchers, and those who sought what others ignored. In 1928, a radio enthusiast set up equipment there, trying to capture distant signals. His logs show something unusual, a recurring pattern of interference every night at 3:17 a.m. The tone appeared, rose in pitch, then dropped. He described it as a voice without mouth, breathing through the machine. The same pattern was found again in 1953 on military field recordings from nearby terrain. The tone always lasted precisely 13 seconds, always on the same night of the year, November 12th, the anniversary of the caretaker's final journal entry. Whether coincidence or design, the repetition is exact. By the late 20th century, Hollow Creek had become a ghost location, not on maps, not in guidebooks, mentioned only in mining records. But those who ventured there reported strange phenomena. Cameras refusing to focus near the creek. Compasses drifting without magnetic interference. Voices echoing seconds after speech, as though repeated by the air itself. The land seemed to remember sound. In 1987, a team of geologists placed a microphone at the center of the old foundation to measure subsurface vibration. The recording is one of the few remaining artifacts connected to Hollow Creek. For the first hour, nothing. Then faintly, a pattern emerged. 6 pulses. A pause. 6 again. The rhythm matched the song the children were said to hum in their sleep. A technician monitoring the playback remarked that the sound resembled breathing, as if the ground itself was drawing air through unseen lungs. When the team returned the next day, their equipment was gone. Only the microphone cable remained, burned clean through at the midpoint. Analysis of the tape later revealed a low human voice speaking one word beneath the hum: below. No one claimed responsibility for altering the recording. No voice print matched any member of the team. The original tape is stored today in a private archive under restricted access. For those who have heard it, the experience is always the same: a brief hum, then silence, followed by a feeling that someone has entered the room. They say you can almost hear breath against your neck, though the sound has already stopped, as if the silence itself is listening back. Pause. Hollow Creek was forgotten because it had to be. The records were sealed, the ground reclaimed, the stories dismissed as superstition. But sound has a way of waiting. It does not vanish, it lingers, stored in the walls, in the soil, in the air that once vibrated with its tone. What burned that night was not a building, it was a choir. And choirs, even when silenced, leave an echo. The fire may have ended their song, but in the hollow beneath the creek, something still keeps time. By 1999, Hollow Creek was nearly erased. The last structures had fallen. The access road had been reclaimed by forest. But one man refused to let it stay buried. His name was Dr. Alan Harker, an acoustic anthropologist from the University of South Carolina. His research focused on sound memory, the idea that vibrations can be captured by objects and later replayed through resonance. He believed the stones of Hollow Creek still held the voices of the lost. In late October of that year, he and 2 assistants began an unauthorized excavation at the edge of the former orphanage site. They brought only minimal equipment: a generator, contact microphones, and a single reel-to-reel recorder. For 6 nights they camped beside the creek, setting the microphones along the foundation stones, playing tones at different frequencies, listening for response. The first 5 nights yielded nothing, just static and the slow hiss of running water. On the 6th night, the microphones began to respond. At first, faint resonance, then unmistakable rhythm. 6 pulses, a pause, 6 again. The same pattern heard on earlier recordings. the same that matched the children's hum. The team thought it was coincidence, but when they isolated the frequency, another sound emerged beneath it. A voice. The voice was female, soft, aged, almost whispering through distortion. The words are unclear in the first section, but by the 4th minute, a phrase repeats clearly enough to be understood. Don't wake them. After 20 minutes, the recorder shut down. The next morning, Dr. Harker's assistants found him sitting by the creek, staring into the water. He refused to speak for 3 days. When he finally returned to the university, he handed the reel to a technician and asked that it never be played again. The technician ignored him. 2 days later, while transferring the tape to digital, she heard something Harker hadn't mentioned. A second voice, male, distant. It says one word, once, below. When she told Harker, he destroyed the digital copy and sealed the reel in a lead-lined case. His personal notes, discovered after his death in 2006, describe a theory that Hollow Creek was not merely a site of tragedy, but an instrument, a structure designed to channel sound into the earth itself. He wrote, "The orphanage was built on a natural cavity. Wren amplified it. The children sustained it. The fire changed it." According to Harker, the material found fused beneath the foundation wasn't ordinary stone. It was a composite of glass, silica, and something organic, tissue hardened by exposure to extreme resonance. In other words, the walls themselves might contain remnants of what was once alive. His colleagues dismissed the theory as pseudoscience, but years later, one of his assistants confirmed that the reel still exists, locked away, labelled simply 1907 Hollow Creek Sequence B. Copies circulate quietly online, though none are verified. Listeners describe the same experience: a low hum, a faint chorus, then silence. Moments later, the playback continues, even after the track has ended. The hum bleeds into the room, resonating through walls, through furniture, through breath. The sound stops only when the listener speaks aloud, as if acknowledging it resets the silence. There are other recordings, unofficial, unverified, scattered across decades. In 2002, a field technician restoring a hydrophone near the same creek picked up subaquatic vibration. The tone resembled a human sigh slowed to impossible length. When accelerated, it formed the same melody, transcribed from the caretaker's journal. In 2010, a documentary crew attempted to record ambient sound for a regional folklore series. Their camera audio caught what one producer called children speaking backward. Sound engineers analysing the clip found no evidence of editing, only reversed phonemes forming syllables that loosely translated to still here. In every instance, the same timestamp reappears, 3:17 a.m., the moment the pulse begins. Modern spectrograms of those recordings reveal something hidden in the waveform, a repeating pattern resembling the hollow seal, embedded in the sound itself. Whether by design or coincidence, the frequency carries the mark of its origin. Those who have studied it say it affects the body directly. At specific volume, listeners report seeing shapes move at the edge of their vision, hearing breathing that syncs with their own, feeling a subtle pressure on the back of the neck, as if the air thickens in rhythm. The phenomenon has been called resonant presence. The same effect is documented in rare cases of infrasound exposure, sound waves too low for the ear but felt by the body. Harker believed Hollow Creek was a living example of that phenomenon, that Wren had discovered the pitch that binds memory to matter. He called it the orphan's note, the note that refuses to fade. Some modern physicists have tried to replicate it using digital tones. None succeed. The pattern always breaks. Yet, on the anniversary of the fire, the same frequency still registers on seismographs near the old site. A pulse, constant, faint, always beginning just after midnight. One researcher, studying those readings in 2015, made a remark that haunts the record. He said, "The vibration doesn't travel outward. It comes from above, then stops inside the ground. Hollow Creek, it seems, still sings. Not loud enough to hear, just loud enough to remember." In 2017, an independent research collective called the Hollow Archive was formed, a small group of historians, sound engineers, and archivists drawn together by a single question: if Hollow Creek still resonates, where is the source? Their work began quietly. At first, they gathered documents, newspaper clippings, and surviving recordings. But in the spring of 2018, the team obtained something no one had seen in more than a century: the original map of the orphanage grounds. It came from a private collection in Asheville, marked with faint blue lines drawn in graphite. The map showed more than foundations. Beneath the main hall was an additional chamber, circular 20 feet below ground, labelled simply Resonance Room. No record of that chamber exists in county blueprints. The Hollow Archive decided to find it. Their plan was to conduct a small excavation using ground-penetrating radar and microphonic sensors, not to dig, but to listen. On the first day, the radar returned normal readings: compact soil, fractured stone. On the second, faint anomalies, air pockets where no air should be. On the third, they detected vibration: steady, low, rhythmic, 6 pulses. A pause, 6 again. The same pattern. Late that night, one of the team, an engineer named Marisol Dent, lowered a sensor probe through a narrow borehole drilled into the cavity. What she recorded would become known as the descent tape. The audio begins with her voice counting measurements aloud, followed by a long silence. Then faintly, a sound, like air being drawn through a flute. At the 20-second mark, she says quietly, "It's breathing down there." Moments later, the probe begins to pick up the same frequency recorded by Harker 20 years earlier, but this time it modulates. The hum changes pitch, responding to her voice, as if the chamber is listening. The tape ends abruptly. When the team retrieved the equipment, the cable insulation had melted in one section, though the borehole never exceeded normal temperature. Dent described hearing the hum continue after the power was cut, not through speakers, but through the ground itself. She said it was inside the bones. That night, the team voted to return with better tools. 2 weeks later, they reopened the borehole and inserted a small camera rig. The footage is grainy, tinted green, marked by static interference. The camera lowers slowly. Dust drifts past the lens. After several feet, the walls transition from soil to fused stone, smooth, rippled, almost translucent. The descent continues for 22 feet. Then the cavity opens. The lens pans, catching what appears to be curved architecture, not natural. The surface glimmers faintly under the light, patterned with concentric circles. In the center of the floor lies a shallow depression, as if something once rested there. Around the rim, faint shapes, handprints pressed into the stone, too small to be adult. The camera lingers, the light flickers. For 3 seconds, the image distorts. When the feed clears, a faint reflection is visible in the glass surface below, the vague outline of a face, motionless, eyes open. Then the signal cuts. The recording ends at timestamp 03:17:06 a.m. When Dent reviewed the footage the next day, she noticed something else. At the very end of the tape, In the static, there is sound. Not the hum, a whisper. Slowed and enhanced, it forms two words. We wait. The team halted work immediately and sealed the site, reporting equipment failure to avoid legal action. But not all of them left Hollow Creek. Dent returned alone 3 weeks later. Her colleagues said she was obsessed, convinced she had found what Wren built the orphanage to protect. She brought one recording device and left a single note in her field journal. If sound is memory, then this place remembers everything. She was never seen again. The recorder was found submerged in the creek 3 months later. The device was water damaged but partially recoverable. The final 30 seconds play clearly. First, dense breathing, then a rising tone. At 13 seconds faintly, multiple voices, children distant, overlapping. They repeat the same word again and again. Home. The sound fades. The last noise on the tape is a single exhale, not hers, followed by silence so dense the waveform flattens completely. Audio engineers have verified the authenticity. The tape's final timestamp, 03:17 a.m. Since that night, no one has legally entered the Hollow Creek site. The borehole was sealed with concrete. The coordinates were redacted from public record, yet the vibrations continue. Seismographs still record a faint rhythm beneath that section of the valley, weaker now, but present. 6 pulses, a pause, 6 again. Some believe Dent succeeded in awakening the chamber fully. Others say she completed what Wren began, but there's another possibility that she didn't wake anything at all. She simply answered. In 2020, while cataloguing documents acquired from private collectors, the Hollow Archive uncovered something entirely unexpected. A folded envelope, yellowed with age, tucked inside the last known blueprint of Hollow Creek Orphanage. The blueprint itself had been drawn by Wren in 1906, labelled meticulously with measurements, materials, and annotations that no one could fully decipher. But this envelope was different. No stamps, no return address, only Wren's handwriting, precise and small, on the front, to the one who listens. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The ink had faded to brown, but the words were legible. If you are reading this, then the Hollow remembers you. The children were not lost, they were preserved. The fire took the vessel, but not the note. Every sound, every breath, every footstep has been captured. The building is no longer walls and beams, but memory itself. Only those who descend to its heart will hear it clearly. Only those who answer can join. Beware the pause. It is patient. It waits. The note bore no signature, date, or further instruction, yet forensic analysis confirmed the ink was consistent with 1906 composition. Scholars debated its meaning. Was it a warning, a guide, or a confession? But the Hollow Archive noticed a pattern. Every recording, every anomaly, every pulse began at 03:17 a.m. They concluded Wren may have built the orphanage to channel time itself, not merely sound. In late 2021, the team attempted to trace the heart referenced in the letter. They mapped the foundations using 3D scanning, cross-referencing Wren's notes with modern LiDAR. And they found a space previously thought inaccessible, a triangular cavity beneath the main hall, its apex pointing downward, the walls lined with the same fused composite stone noted by Harker decades earlier. A triangular prism, nearly 8 feet deep, its base disappearing into the earth. The cavity's acoustics were extraordinary. Sounds made at the top, a whisper, a footstep, echoed perfectly, unchanged. even after 3 minutes. The team realized this was the chamber Wren referenced in the letter, a device designed to hold sound, memory, and possibly something more. A theory emerged. If sound could be preserved indefinitely in this space, could it also preserve consciousness? In 2022, an experiment was conducted. A single recorder and microphone were lowered into the prism. The device was left running from dusk until dawn. When the recorder was retrieved, the playback was initially empty, only static. But at 03:17:06 a.m., a faint chorus emerges. Not children alone, not human voices entirely. Something layered. Whispers, sobs, murmurs, laughter, and a tone beneath all of it. Low, resonant, impossible to attribute to a single source. Some parts of the recording were inaudible to the ear, but spectrogram analysis revealed patterns. Repeated sequences that matched the 6-pulse rhythm noted throughout Hollow Creek's history. The tape concluded with a single whisper, barely audible. "Do you hear us?" The archivist reported that while reviewing the audio, each member felt a cold draft despite the building being sealed. They described the sensation of something moving just behind them. A collective unease settled over the group, so profound that work ceased for several days. It became clear Wren's final message was not merely a warning, it was an invitation. But no one knew who or what the invitation was for. One thing was certain: the orphanage was no longer only history. It was an active presence. The letter ended with the phrase, "Answer only if you are ready to stay." And the echoes of that phrase, faint, persistent, and layered, have been documented in every sound captured at Hollow Creek since. In 2023, while sorting through private archives, the Hollow Archive uncovered an object previously unknown, a small, leather-bound diary, charred along the edges, water-stained and fragile. It had belonged to a girl named Evelyn Cartwright, one of the last children registered at Hollow Creek Orphanage. She was 9 at the time of the fire. The diary is written in a careful, almost adult hand, but portions are coded, letters replaced by symbols, numbers, or shapes. Specialists in cryptography, consulted over several months, have managed to partially decode the entries. The diary begins ordinarily. "Mother is gone. I am alone. Wren says we must stay quiet and listen." But by late June, entries become different. Symbols replace sentences. Researchers speculate this was Evelyn's method of recording what she saw without attracting the attention of the caretakers. Decoded fragments reveal something chilling. We walk in circles below. The walls hum. The hum talks back. It knows our names. Some go and never return. Others come back but are not the same. Eyes wide, silent. Wren says it is for our safety. These fragments correspond with Harker's notes decades later, children sustaining a resonance and the building amplifying it. Another entry, dated July 12, 1907, reads, "I heard voices tonight, not ours. They ask questions. I did not answer. They are patient. They wait." Evelyn's final entry, partially deciphered, is the most disturbing. "The floor moves. The walls breathe. I can see the others in the stone. They smile but do not blink. I am next." Historians believe the diary was hidden deliberately, placed in a hollow behind the caretaker's desk. Its survival is extraordinary, considering the fire and decades of decay. The diary provides another unsettling detail. Names. Children previously unrecorded in public registries. Names written repeatedly in small letters along the margins, always in sets of 6. Analysts noticed a correlation. 6 names per page, matching the 6-pulse pattern recorded by Harker, Dent, and others. Researchers speculate the pattern may not be coincidental, that the building itself counted the children. Each pulse may have corresponded to a life, a memory, or something else entirely. The diary also describes a hidden chamber below the nursery, a space where the children were instructed to gather at night. Evelyn writes, "We sit in the dark. The hum surrounds us. We are told not to speak, but it hears everything. It wants music. We hum for it. It listens." The Hollow Archive cross-referenced this with Harker's and Dent's recordings. The frequencies match the pitch described in Evelyn's entries. The diary ends abruptly. The final page is burned, only a few words remain. The note grows. "They will hear us. I cannot leave." No other copies exist. The diary provides the closest direct account from a child at Hollow Creek. The archive warns, even reading these entries aloud can trigger reports of auditory phenomena, humming, whispers, faint pressure in the air. This reinforces the theory. Hollow Creek is not just a building. It is a vessel, a memory stored in stone, vibration, and perhaps the children themselves. By 2024, the Hollow Archive had collected every remaining artifact, recording, and report associated with Hollow Creek Orphanage. The final set of recordings was acquired from a private collector in the Smoky Mountains, a man who had inherited reels and tapes from his grandfather, a former caretaker. These recordings had never been catalogued. Most were unmarked, some badly degraded, but a few were intact enough to study. The first tape begins as a typical day. Children playing, footsteps in the halls, the occasional laugh. But by mid-recording, faint vibrations begin. The sounds are low, almost imperceptible at first, and grow steadily, matching the 6-pulse pattern that recurs throughout Hollow Creek history. By the third tape, the pulse is constant. Footsteps stop in the recordings, conversations fade, and then over the hum, voices emerge. The most chilling aspect is their tone. Layered, distant, yet precise. Children's voices, yes, but also something else. A resonance that bends the spaces between sounds impossible to localize. Researchers slowed the audio and noticed that the voice sequences matched names from Evelyn's diary. Each child's name aligns with a pulse in the hum. 6 pulses. A pause. 6 again. The final reel captures something extraordinary. The microphone was placed in the triangular chamber Dent had previously recorded. The audio begins with footsteps descending the stairs. Then silence. At 03:17:06 a.m., a sound emerges, a low tone that rises gradually. It's followed by multiple voices, children, adults, overlapping, repeating the same phrase in unison, "We are here." At 13 seconds, a faint sound, metallic, wet and irregular, punctuates the hum. Spectrogram analysis reveals patterns. The pulse frequency increases, then slows, forming a rhythm almost like breathing. The most unsettling moment occurs at 03:17:36 a.m. The audio distorts, static, a sudden high-pitched note, and then a whisper, unmistakable, "Do you see us?" When researchers played the recording in the room, some reported physical sensations, chills along the spine, pressure in the chest, and the perception of movement behind them. The reels conclude with silence, not gradual, instant, absolute. Cross-referencing all data, the archive found something remarkable. Every anomaly, every pulse, every recording began and ended with the same 6-beat rhythm. It was not random. It was deliberate. Dent, Evelyn, Harker, and even Wren himself were all part of a pattern. And according to the archive, the pattern continues today. Small vibrations, faint but measurable, are still detectable beneath the Hollow Creek site. 6 pulses, a pause, 6 again. What they had recorded, the children, the chamber, the hum, was not confined to the past. It exists somewhere between memory, sound, and something else entirely. The final question arises. If you enter Hollow Creek and the hum begins, will you hear it? Or will it hear you? Hollow Creek Orphanage no longer stands. Only ruins, ash, and memories remain, yet its presence has never left the Appalachian Valley. Researchers, locals, and amateur explorers report the same anomalies: faint pulses beneath the ground, whispers carried on the wind, and lights that flicker in abandoned ruins. Over the decades, stories spread quietly. Children vanishing in nearby towns, animals refusing to enter certain areas, trains and vehicles recording inexplicable hums on tape. The Hollow Archive compiled these accounts, cataloguing over 100 independent reports from 1907 to the present. Their findings suggest a terrifying possibility. Hollow Creek is not only a location, but a persistent phenomenon, a site where sound, memory, and consciousness converge. Survivors' descendants, unknowingly, still carry echoes of the orphanage. Some claim to hear the hum in their homes at exactly 03:17 a.m., though they have never visited the valley. Others have reported recurring dreams, children singing, footsteps in the dark, and rooms that shift when no one is watching. Scientists remain puzzled. Geologists measure nothing extraordinary. Acousticians and engineers find no artificial source for the hum. Yet the recordings, diaries, and blueprints converge on one truth. Hollow Creek was engineered to preserve, to remember, and perhaps to summon. Evelyn's diary, dense tapes, Harker's notes, each piece confirms the same pattern. 6 pulses, a pause, 6 again. The final legacy of Hollow Creek may be beyond comprehension. Some theories suggest the orphanage was Wren's attempt to capture life itself. Others believe the children's voices became part of the building, trapped, preserved, resonating across decades. Modern explorers caution, entering the ruins, even today, is risky. Some return changed, others vanish. The land remembers, the hum persists, and the archive concluded with one unnerving statement. The Hollow Creek Orphanage does not sleep. It listens, it waits, and when you hear the hum, it may already know your name. For decades, people have asked, was it human? Was it mechanical? Or was it something else entirely? The truth may never be fully understood, yet the recordings remain, the diaries survive, and the pulses continue beneath the Appalachian soil. The valley holds its secrets tightly, so the question lingers for anyone who dares approach Hollow Creek today. If you hear it, will you answer?